Test, test, test. Test, test. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Well, I guess Britain can see me, but can you also hear me? Oh, well. I trained for this. I have a very special intro for today. I guess it's only Jeroen and Britain who will see this, but I practiced for this, so bear with me. What's up, unpolitical bookworms? Raph here to talk some unproblematic faves like H.P. Lovecraft, Orson Scott Card, and Adolf. Wait, scratch that. But guys, I need to say, well, I'm excited you're here, but I need to take a theatrical sip of this cup of tea because I'm sick, so I can't drink alcohol for now. Anyway, welcome back, everybody. I hope you're having fun. I certainly am. We'll see how this goes on a Friday night. That is not a Saturday night, like usual. But you know, glad you can hear me, Britain. Hey, Joe. I'm glad you see me. I hope it's worth seeing me. I'm slowly recovering. I wasn't lying when I said I was sick. I had a cold over the last weekend. I caught it in the most honorable way, which is going to a concert, getting all sweaty in the mosh pit, and then spending like 3 hours on public transport and windy train station platforms in the middle of the night for like 3 hours, which is exactly where you catch a cold if you're unprepared, or, well, have very much weakened your defenses, your immune system defenses, by drinking alcohol. And speaking of alcohol, I've heard that it's actually medicinal sometimes. So I brought something, and I have medicinal alcohol. Cheers, everybody. Hey, Jared, how you doing, man? Hey, Jeroen. I'm glad it feels like coming home. I do my very, very best, and um, it's been a rough week all around. As I said, like I spent most of the week lying in bed and recovering from the cold. I hope I won't catch another one, because this Sunday I'll be going to another concert, because turns out that Paradise Lost and Primordial are coming on tour, and yeah, I'm excited. Um, Welcome to this very much booktube stream where we talk about heavy metal until I actually segue into printed things. Anyway, I listened to the new Primordial album, which came out today, which is called How It Ends, and it's really good. I really like it already. I was kind of scared because the singer Alan was doing a lot of weird podcasts that are at least conspiracy adjacent during the COVID plague and stuff. So I was worried, but from what I can tell from the first listen, it sounds good. I'm excited. Also, Paradise Lost feeds my 90s gothic self a lot, and I'm really excited to see that on Sunday, but I hope I will not go and just catch another cold immediately, because I want to go back to making real videos and not just do nothing for like an entire week. Hey Ori, how you doing? Yeah, so that's kind of where I am. I did read some books this week, but not that much fiction yet, because I don't know. I got distracted, and then but I did start Generation Lost by Elizabeth Hand, and it's one of those authors that I always keep harping on. It's like, hey guys, read more Elizabeth Hand, and no one except Ori does, because yes, I have not yet read her like sequel to House on the Hill kind of thing. But I've heard it's good. Generation Lost is cool though, because it's like a weird crime novel about a photographer who made it big in the 70s punk scene, and I'm all for there for it because Elizabeth Hand is so good at capturing these very specific, cultural scenes and stuff. You did awesome. I'm glad you read it. I hope you liked it. It's apparent at the moment it's free on Audible, which makes it even better for me right now. All her Castaneri crime novels are free on Audible, so I'm very much enjoying that. How many concerts have I seen this year? That's a very good question. I'm not that many actually, because I mean, I'm incredibly broke this year, to put it mildly, so I can't afford that much. I went to two festivals. One was Keep It True Festival, where I still had the ticket from that I bought in 2019, and one was Iron Fest, where I went with a friend, and then I did see the Exciter tour this year. I went to see Blind Guardian on last Saturday. I'm going to see Primordial this Sunday. I'm I hope to see Son, however you pronounce the guys from Sweden, in 2 weeks. Yeah, this was like the first time I didn't make it to Wacken in, I guess, a decade or something, which feels really bad. Um, I'm sure I saw a couple of other concerts that I just can't remember right now. Um, yeah, because I'm stupid. Is my point. Um, well, Britain, you gotta wait until tomorrow when we have the final discussion on Angela's channel. Do Unicorns Read, when we talk about the end of Perdita Street Station. Now, I have read this book before, so I have thoughts on it. I have not reread the end yet. I'm gonna do that tomorrow morning, I hope. So I'll be very fresh when I go into that discussion. But yeah, if you have nothing else to do, please join us on that live stream tomorrow, the Perdita Street Station live chat, because live stream. Angela's channel is a small one, and there's usually just like 3 or 4 people hanging out in the chat, and it's always more fun if there's more people. And I think the ending of Perdita Street Station is really powerful, but I will not go into spoilers on what I think about what it is that someone did or did not do. So I'll wait until tomorrow about that. Wacken was not evacuated, but they did not let everyone on. Like they stopped letting people on the festival like halfway through the whole thing. Hey Liam, how you doing? Well, playing D&D is one of the best excuses that are out there. I hope you're having fun. You're playing or you're running? So yeah, now Wacken was not evacuated. It was just like only half full, I guess, which is still like a shame. But I think like part of the problem there is that with like festivals of this size, and it's a general thing if you're an organizer of a concert or a festival, the problem that you have is that unless the authorities tell you to shut it down, you can't actually shut it down and get your there's like a like insurance for organizers, and unless someone officially tells you to shut it down, those insurance companies won't pay, and you can't just like cancel Wacken on your own. That's financial suicide. um and the local authorities did not tell them to shut down, so they were kind of left in the cold. And we had the same thing with the last Riddle of Steel festival that I organized. We had the same thing because it was in 2020. Let me think. 2021, or was it still 2020? I'm confused, but I think it was 2020. No, it was 2021. So it was in 2021, and it was the same thing because like the local officials were debating around like new COVID restrictions or no new COVID restrictions. And we're like, well, you guys, we got to plan ahead. We have bands flying in from different countries. We need to make sure the shit works. You can't just like leave us hanging. They're like, well, we'll decide on the 5th of December, and we're like, well, could you give us a hint maybe? Because the concert's on the 6th, and we kind of need to know in advance. So there's a thing where as an organizer of a concert, of a festival, or whatever, you're kind of beholden to the officials, the local bureaucracy, and if they don't make any decision, you're kind of fucked. And I think that's kind of what happened with Wacken, because if the local authorities had said like on Sunday before Wacken, like, hey, you guys, it's raining too much, stop this shit, they could have canceled the whole thing, and they probably gotten a part of the money back from insurance, and it would have still been a loss, but it would have probably been survivable in a lot of ways. But yeah, you end up with like a fucking mess if no one does that. Yeah, making money is kind of hard. I've heard about that. I'm failing at it as well. So I'm not saying you're in good company, but at least you're in my company. Um, but yeah, I mean, as long as you're reading good stuff, Liam, that's something, isn't it? Um, uh, uh, we all live in a dystopia. I don't even know what you mean by the buildings in the background of my video. Um, if you mean the ones that I filmed on my balcony, I live in um it's social housing, so I guess you'd call it the projects in the US, and probably like a council estate in Britain, I guess. So I don't have to pay too much. And they're like, cheap houses made out of concrete, full of soon to be delinquents or former delinquents, including me. So I hope that explains it. I mean, so I don't think I live in like very much of a dystopia. I just live, you know, on the edge of town, on a hill that is overlooking a castle, because capitalism overwhelms even medieval castles, which is kind of what Marx said, I guess. Um, uh, how industrial capitalism overtakes feudalism and feudal capital. But yeah, Money Angst is a good inspiration for cyberpunk. And I'm still sorry I didn't manage to get to Christopher Arroyo's cyberpunk stream, but time zones and stuff prevented me. So I'm sorry about it. I'm gonna watch it over the weekend. Not tomorrow, because I'm helping a friend who's organizing a band festival, like a local town band festival with like different bands from partner cities of where I live. So there's bands from Slovenia and France and Britain and possibly Romania. I'm not quite sure. And it's they're all playing shows in different bars in the entirety of town, so they need people to hang around at pub entrances and look scary and intimidate people that don't want to pay the entrance fee of like $5 for the entire town. So that's what I'll do tomorrow. So I don't know if I have time to watch the cyberpunk stream on the recorded. Yeah, it would have been in the middle of the night. That too. And I'm very grumpy in the middle of the night, so maybe it's better if I don't watch it in the middle of the night. I don't know, Britain. I don't know why you don't like cyberpunk. I think um it kind of depends on where you start with cyberpunk, but also like cyberpunk is a very explicitly political genre, and you have to be aware of that. And you also need to be aware of the fact that so much of like what we call cyberpunk, the William Gibson, Bert Sterling, John Walter Williams style of cyberpunk is, especially in the case of say someone like William Gibson, is inspired by more like the beat poets and stuff like William S. Burroughs and things like that, and Fritz Lieber, than your average science fiction. So it's way more playing with language and bending language into all kinds of odd shapes and bits and pieces, and doing that kind of stuff than telling a straight up science fiction story. And then it's all about how we, as humanity, build a monster which is called capitalism and is the system, and how we kind of are crushed by that, and hopefully looking for ways out of that system. But it's very much the fight against that larger, overwhelming machine that kind of makes cyberpunk tick as a system, as a genre, in a way that your classical science fiction doesn't have, because humans still have agency in those kind of stories, whereas in a lot of the at least the Sprawl trilogy by Gibson and stuff like that, humans don't have like actual like world changing agency unless something outside of that kind of gives them that power. And I think that loss of power to change the world, I think, is a sort of incredibly important aspect of cyberpunk, and kind of under underlies the whole experience as a feeling that we've kind of given up that not that right, but that we've kind of given up the possibility to actually change the world, because we created something that has taken over, that taken the power away from us. I have not yet read Venomous Lumpsucker. I've heard of it though, and it sounds like something I might really enjoy. Oh yeah, Transmetropolitan. Yeah, I can see you liking that. Why it did win the Clark Award, the Venomous Lumpsucker? I should see if I can get it, if it's available in audio, or maybe I can get an ebook somewhere in one form or another. So yeah, I've heard of it, but I haven't read it yet. Anyway, so what have you guys been reading over the last couple of weeks? I mean, as I said, like when I made the post, like I recorded like a full-on 25-minute, very self-indulgent, very self-reflecting kind of navel-gazing video. And then yeah, the audio was fucked. And that was not a good moment. Well, Britain, you might be wrong on that whole capitalism thing. Just saying. You've probably been right about all the coups in Latin America and stuff like that, but the capitalism part, not so good. Yeah, I'm definitely feeling better. It's you catch a cold, it just takes a while it has to run its course. It starts with like a sore throat and cough, and then it slowly moves into the nose, and then you have a runny nose, and it just takes like, I don't know, 5-6 days, and then you're done. And meds can't do much except suppress the symptoms, but it's not going to shorten the process at all. Yeah, the big book of cyberpunk, I'd love to read that. Well, you got until Sunday, and then October starts. And then I guess we'll all read that one October novel by Roger Zelazny, right? Ori, and possibly Liam. I don't know if you've read that yet. Well, we were talking about, like, Ori was suggesting that in the Unabridged Burners Discord, to read is it a lonesome night in October or a night in lonesome October? I keep fucking it up. Anyway, one of the last, if not the last, published Roger Zelazny novels, and we just like read one chapter per day and throughout October. So I thought that might be something that would interest you, Liam, as well, because I'm certainly going to do it because someone sent me a link to a definitely very legal audiobook version of the whole thing. So I thought that might be something that you'd be interested in as well. I mean, obviously, everyone is invited to join us. I just thought that, with Zelazny being Zelazny and stuff like that, that it might be of particular interest to Liam. A Night of the Lonesome October. Thanks, Ori. As I said, like I'm really terrible with titles and stuff. So we're doing it this October. We're not as cool as the Sword and Sorcery guys, but All right, please do that, Jeroen. That would be awesome. I guess we'll just like probably just do like put like I'll start a channel on the Unabridged Burners Discord, so we don't bother anyone else. But I think that's like the best place to do it because that's sort of where I have some power. And we all know how good it is if germs get power, right? Hey, biggest, how you doing? I talk about Germans having power and the Irish show up. Always willing to, always ready to take part of in that. Hey, Drew, how you doing? I am having a good day. I returned all the really shitty neoliberal American beers I had to drink, which were like 90 cans, and that gave us enough deposit money to buy a case of really cheap German beer. The escapism thumbnail. Yeah, that was like it's the usual thing. Like the way we do thumbnails is usually that I have a video or a video idea, and then I talk to John, who's sadly not here because he's actually doing the capitalism thing, which is apparently throwing tires for money in Canada. Um, so what we usually do is like I have an idea, and then he comes up with an idea, and we usually just have a couple of beers and talk about something. Usually, it used to be around our Doug Heresy role playing game campaign that is currently on hold, sadly. And we come up with something like, "Hey, I have this idea, and I want I want this to be like the cheesiest drug dealer kind of image that you can come up with." And then he found a picture of like a very different guy with the jacket full of stuff full of like other in the original picture stock footage picture that he found somewhere, it was watches and other stuff, and he replaced it with books, and he and then added like the school building and the van and put the fantasy booktube stuff on it. And it's like, wow, this is exactly what I had in mind. I wanted it to look cheesy and sleazy. I have not lived in other countries than Germany. No, sadly, no. I kind of missed the boat on doing like an Erasmus kind of semester in a different country when I was at university. I'm still sad about that. I've visited other countries a lot, but I've never lived anywhere else yet. Well, I mean, if they're old government programs, I guess they're sort of like, I mean, they're made for broadcast, right? Look, I will never get like tired of Nazi jokes. The reason is the Nazis destroyed basically all of German folklore, so all we have at this point is Nazi jokes, which I'm always willing to use as much as I can. If I moved elsewhere, possibly Greece, because I've been to Greece so many times. I just love the place, the vibe, the country, the people. I just love that. So possibly Greece. Although I would have to learn Greek, and modern Greek is hard to learn. Um, beyond that, good question. I I don't know. Well, possibly like any place I can speak English and get away with my English. I guess I'm on board with that. Um, Scandinavia. I'm not good with the like. Generally, I'm not very good with like really hot temperatures, which with our planet kind of slowly burning up, makes makes the list of interesting countries get shorter and shorter every year. And now don't combine that with my saying things about Greece. I'm aware it's A, burning, and B, too hot. Could see myself moving to, so I don't know, someplace like Bulgaria or somewhere over there in the Balkans. Yeah, I mean that's the thing is like we got Grimm's fairy tales, but we also got the Brothers Grimm, and there's some grim stuff in there. Sorry. So yeah. Oh, to Jordan. What you doing in Jordan, Jeroen? I'll have to go. Well, I have to, but I'm definitely flying back to Israel later this year because my niece was born last Saturday on the 23rd. So obviously I'll have to visit as soon as possible. So I'll go back to Israel later this year to give that small child the noisiest and most annoying toys I can find because it's what uncles are supposed to do. Also, I live like I live an entire air travel away from the kid, so when she gets really loud, I'm not there. So I'm gonna take advantage as much as possible from all those privileges, and I'll give it like cheap plastic flutes that are slightly off key and a kid's drum kit and stuff like that is sort of my goal. So I'll definitely fly back to Israel later this year. Well, propaganda is not necessarily bad art. I mean, it's effective after all, right, Liam? I mean, that's kind of part of the problem. Yeah, Scotland's neat. I don't know about England. I've been to London once for a concert, for a Heaven and Hell concert, like the Black Sabbath stuff with Dio, and it was really good. I got incredibly drunk on like a pub crawl through the entirety of London for like 20 hours straight. Because if you go there and you have friends from Australia, you can just go from pub to pub because every pub in London has at least one Australian working there, and they all know each other. So you get free beers, and free beers in London is definitely a bonus, but also a danger. It was a time. I had a lot of fun there, but I don't think I could do that for a living. Yeah, yeah. See, here's a funny thing. Is like everyone is like congratulating me to the birth of my niece, and I'm like, I didn't do anything at all. It's all someone else. But yeah, it takes a lot of pressure away from me because now my parents are happy, and they like my mom's now a grandma, and she's like really happy, and I don't have to do anything anymore. So that's great. Happy uncling, yeah, yeah. Thanks. No, I don't think me having relatives in Israel has anything to do with with me talking about anti-Semitism a lot. I think it's way more about me. A, really hating any form of bigotry and hating people, you know, hating other people for stuff. Also, yeah, I come from a country that has done a lot of like Germany's been really good at the whole anti-Semitism stuff, and it's very much drilled into us at this point. Luckily, if you have like any form of like relatively good school education, you get very sensitized towards anti-Semitism, and it's certainly something I was already very actively against before my sister moved to Israel and I had family there. So it's got nothing to do with that, and I just think it how to say that it's look, anti-Semitism is wrong and it's dangerous, and we should do all we can do against it. And it's got nothing to do with like where we have family or not. It's just like any form of racism, something we should just like fight as much as we can to avoid and to get rid of. um, yeah, maybe not next year, but I'm pretty sure my niece will go to a festival or concert very soon. Actually, like the first time I went to Wacken Open Air, I went to Wacken Open Air when I was 18 with my sister, who was 16 at the time, which was really funny because if you're 16 in Germany, you go to a concert, you need to have a family member or someone who's officially in charge of you who's over 18, or otherwise you'll have to leave at, I think it's 10 p.m., something like that, because you can't stay out on your own beyond that time if you're underage in Germany. So I was in charge of her because I was 18 at the time. But on the other hand, because I'm blind, I need someone to help me around. And she was doing that. So we were both like taking care of each other. I'm getting very drunk. Let's be honest about that. At Wacken Open Air back in the day. So I'm pretty sure that that kid will definitely get its chance to experience rock and roll sooner or later. All right, Britain. Yeah, uncling is definitely better than parenting. It's like all the fun, none of the responsibilities. Also, you get to do all the irresponsible shit and then fuck off. It's great. All right, so yes, anti-Semitism is still a problem in Germany. Of course, it is. Anti-Semitism is a problem everywhere in the West, at least, because it's so deeply ingrained through centuries and centuries, and very few people will go all out and go yeah, I'm an anti-Semite. That's not something people do, but a lot of the more insidious aspects are just like sort of like in what you might call like a cultural subconscious or something. So it's very people will fall into these things a lot, and Germans are still very much into that. Like maybe Germans are a bit more aware of the more overt aspects of anti-Semitism and avoid those. But when it comes to the other stuff, then it's definitely there, and we have this like the post Holocaust anti-Semitism. Um, the one that's tied to to Holocaust denial and all kinds of other ugliness. The idea that sort of because we did one thing wrong once and now they're always taking us down for it and we'll never hear the end of it. And it's something that you hear a lot when you talk to well, not talk to, but when you see what Nazis and neo-Nazis talk about and Holocaust deniers, a lot of people talk about how sort of the Shoah is used as a weapon by the Jews to keep down the Germans, and that sort of new post post Shoah kind of anti-Semitism is definitely something you find in parts of Germany as well. Definitely. which is, really fucked up shit. Hey, Katya, you made it home. I did not ask you that before, but you said you went on like a 2.5 hour car trip in Belgium. Like, can you do that in Belgium without ending up in a different country? Because like, I feel like you you start anywhere within Belgium. You take a car for 2.5 hours, unless you're just trying to get from one end of Brussels to the other. I thought you'll probably end up in France or the Netherlands or Germany or possibly possibly the other end of the side of the channel if the British let you in. How do you get an invite to the Bridge Burner Discord, Jared? You find one of Iskar Jarak's videos on YouTube, and he's got them linked in his video descriptions. Or I'll find it and put it there, or I don't know, someone else, like Joe or Biggest or what, whoever puts it into the chat, because then you'll have it immediately. But otherwise, that's where you find the invite to the Discord. It is a Malazan Discord server, but it does have other channels, and I feel like I'm slowly taking it over, which is not what I set out to do. But while Iskar is still on his break, I guess we'll talk about whatever comes up, and I'm definitely going to do a more serious Malazan reread very soon. I have an idea for like a Malazan related video. I'm kind of working on, so I might have to kind of push that Malazan Book of the Fallen reread a bit up the non-existing TBR. Yeah, see, Kanye, I've been to Belgium. I know how small it is. Yeah, so I have this video thing I want to do, and it kind of did the usual thing. Was like I took a shower and I thought about something, and I'm like, well, this needs a video. And then I did what I usually do when I very much don't do research, which is I go to a website which is sort of the Spanish main of academic literature, by which I mean a place where you can pirate whatever you need. Um, and now I have 10 academic books on individualism and the concept of weakness in religion, in Christian theology, and other related stuff. So there's a Malazan video, or a general video that kind of harkens back to the whole like everyone hates Philly scene in Dead House Gates and mostly House of Chains. And I want to talk about that. My plan is to tie it into the way Tolkien portrays Denethor, because I think the character of Denethor in Lord of the Rings is an incredibly interesting and powerful character in that whole idea of weakness versus strength kind of thing. It'll also involve, and I just saw Joe tweeting about it earlier. It'll definitely also go back to the idea of the hero's journey, because I think there's something very fundamental in how we read fantasy, and how we how fantasy stories rely on characters overcoming odds and overcoming um, all kinds of bad things happening, and how they're always able to overcome that, because that's a very specific narrative, and there's different ways of overcoming that. There's the more existentialist Nietzschean through will alone, kind of Conan, like the Conan strain of fantasy, where you overcome all the odds by just like, being a badass. And there's a more like religious, in particular, I guess, a Catholic way, which is sort of the Tolkien side of things, where weakness is something that is definitely, well, if not encouraged, then at least one way to succeed is to embrace your weakness and trust yourself in the hands of a higher power. And then there's characters like, say, Felicine in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, who does neither, and who fails because, yes, sometimes we fail when we have, because the world is not set up for people to overcome the odds at out of their own willpower, because that's not how the world works. But it's not something we want to read, especially not in fantasy. So I think a lot of times the reaction that we have is exactly that kind of reaction. Is a reaction of anger and hatred towards these characters, because they force us to kind of come to terms with the facts about our own existence and about our own chances in life. And weakness is something we have for all kinds of reasons, political, economic, and philosophical reasons. We're not good at accepting weakness, because like all our society's outlook is on succeeding on your own merits, even though that's a lie. And if you fail, then that's on you, and not just because the world, everything was stacked against you. And that narrative kind of gets broken by characters like Felicin. And if you can't, actually step across that line and emphasize with the character and have compassion for the people that are broken by society, you'll end up like the people that hate Felicin for becoming a mess. And I think that's an interesting aspect, and I want to dive deeper into that. But it ended up with me, having a quick idea and having the entire argument that I just laid out already built up, and then I went and looked at a bunch of books, and now I'm reading a bunch of books to claim that I actually know what I'm talking about when I'm making the video, because I like to have sources at my back and not just go out and make statements, I think. But I think it's an important conversation to have, because a lot of fantasy, science fiction maybe less, but definitely a lot of fantasy and a lot of classic science fiction is built on that like narrative of us overcoming all the things that are arrayed up against us and so forth, which once again ties into that hero's journey narrative of Joseph Campbell, who once again was incredibly inspired by Carl Jung, and Carl Jung was incredibly inspired by one Friedrich Nietzsche. So it all goes back to it's a mess, and I feel that whole part of the genealogy of the Romantics to Friedrich Nietzsche to Carl Jung to Joseph Campbell to modern genre fiction is one specific strain, like ideological strain, that needs to be examined more. And because there's dark and bad things that are kind of carried over from one to the other that are never talked about and never like actively or consciously left behind. So they're always kind of being carried along as well, and they sometimes show like rear their ugly heads, as we in rhetoric's class would say. Yeah, right, Liam. I feel like Denethor needs more attention. I feel bad for Denethor. I would say like Denethor's crime in Tolkien's imagination is like he recognizes his weakness. He's aware of the fact that he can't win against the dark, but he lacks that the very Christian and probably more Catholic than at least some parts of Calvinist Protestant faith. He lacks the ability, or he does not take that leap of faith and places his and everyone else's fate in the hands of God, or in this case, like the hands of Gandalf and whoever is behind him. So he fails at that point, but and I think that's a very interesting part of Lord of the Rings that kind of gets left behind, and people hate Denethor because they're like, well, he's that old mad guy who wants to kill poor Faramir. And yeah, there's more to it, I think. And I have enough trust in Tolkien that Tolkien wanted to do more than just have a bad guy there. Yeah, that's the point. That's kind of my point, Kadia. That yeah, I wanted to hit her, and the sad part is like I've known people in real life that where I have that same impulse, but I hope I've grown as a person, so I realize that yeah, you know, the when you have like friends with depression, or you have depression, you're suffering from depression yourself, and someone is like, well, then just try to get off your ass and do something. It's like that's not how that works. It's a narrative that's out there that you can overcome everything, but just by sheer force of will. But you can't, and I think having that in a fantasy story that is so often kind of framed by the hero's journey and by these kind of um by these narratives of overcoming all the odds and stuff like that. Having that kind of makes it really hard to cope with that for a lot of people, and I think that's what kind of makes it interesting for me. And I feel like the Maybe narrative in Memories of Ice is another one that was incredibly tough to read for me the first time round, because it's like, but yeah, sometimes we can't do anything beyond just suffer and just keep going, when that point where just like keeping on is already just like all we can do. And I think that's not something that most of fantasy literature is open for, I guess. I don't think you fail that much, Liam. Yeah, yeah, but that's kind of the point, Liam. It's not because you fail by yourself. It's just that at this point, the way the world is rigged is that you can only succeed if you know someone and so forth. And those things have nothing to do with your own merits. They're always because of, external circumstances, luck, or knowing someone that knows someone. It's luck and privilege. It's not your own internal capabilities or whatever. And I think, but we still tell ourselves that story. We're still told that story that it's on merit. It's not on merit. Like, if capitalism was, if capitalism would actually lead to a meritocracy, Twitter would be owned by someone else, is my point. But that's the point. It's like I don't think we're supposed to enjoy Felicit's character. The goal is to actually have compassion with her, and actual compassion is really hard to have, and it's like compassion is really hard to have. Compassion is something that we all struggle with because we're so socialized by that myth of self-reliance and individualism, and we see someone suffer, and usually our first impulse is to go, for a lot of people at least, the first impulse is to go like, well, they fucked up, it's their fault, when the first impulse should be, and even if you're a Christian, right, the first impulse should be to go out to those people and help those people, because if we succeed, and Liam's example shows that, right, when you said like you got good jobs because of a friend knew the boss, what makes us succeed is usually the network of connections, of human connections that we have. It's that social support system, sort of like the people we know, the friends we met along the way. These are the people that keep us going, and Tolkien does that up to a point, right? It's like Frodo wants to do the whole individualist hero's journey thing, and then he has Merry and Pippin and Sam and Fredegar Bolger go like, no man, you can't do this on your own. You need people for that. And Yeah, he needs all these people. So Tolkien kind of gets that, but we've kind of a lot of fantasy has kind of lost that because we still want to focus on the big hero who does the main thing, which once again, like because Lord of the Rings is far more clever than a lot of people give it credit for, right? Frodo is not the hero of Lord of the Rings. It's far more Sam or possibly even Gollum, right? Frodo is not the one who throws the ring into the fire. It's not how that works, and I think a lot of that kind of got taken over when the Lord of the Rings narrative got made popular, got popularized in the 60s and 70s with the new adult fantasy series and stuff like, Terry Brooks's Sword of Shannara and other stuff where when the narrative logic of the more like American tradition of fantasy, the pulp tradition of fantasy of, self-actualizing and so forth, when that could kind of that logic got taken and kind of put over the kind of stories and narratives that are in something like Lord of the Rings, which is why stuff, especially stuff like, say, Sword of Shannara or possibly Sword of Truth, what's the first one, Wizard's First Spell Rule, why those books don't really ever work fully is because they're trying to tell one story in the language of a different story, and it kind of breaks down because yeah, it doesn't work like that. Well, Bretton, you should read Malazan. It's well worth your time. It's also a lot of books, and they're all very thick. Biggest. I don't know, man. I doubt that guy could be redeemed. The Mirrors of Tuzun Thune. Now that's a really fascinating story because I think like the Mirrors of Tuzun Thune. One of the reasons why I love the Cole stories, Liam, is that while they already have that hardcore Ubermensch kind of thing, there's this Nietzschean element that a Conan story does do to like almost cartoonish levels from time to time. There is that Cole thing where he does easily get sidetracked and lost in all kinds of things and just starts wondering. And Carl has way more ADHD than Conan, right? Carl gets sidetracked immediately. It's like he sees a cat and he's like, "Oh, there's a cat. That cat is smart. I got to talk to the cat." And then everything else gets lost because Carl has a new hyper focus somewhere. It's like I sympathize with Carl a lot. Is my point. There's a more comments below button. I'll press that button and see what happens. So I'm trying to catch up with the chat. It takes a while because I got sidetracked by talking too much. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, the fact that Cole believes in talking cats. Also, to be fair, the fact that Cole believes a cat is talking makes him a way more believable cat character in the age of social media and cat pics. He's very much someone I was like, yeah, I've known that person, and he was on Facebook, and then he was on Twitter, and now he's on Blue Sky. Um, yeah, so the Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. Well, on the one hand, it's been like, I don't know, 15 years since I read that book, so it wasn't on my mind. I didn't want to go too much into like explicit books. My point was more on the general impulse and the responsibilities that come with that, because the need to escape, I think, is something I want to acknowledge. But the question is like where you go with that, because does the need to escape, or the deep feeling that we need to escape, is that like an argument for everything? Does that kind of allow everything? Because and I don't believe that. I think there is a way, or I hope there's a way to take the need for escapism, the need to switch off the world for a while because it sucks, and to do that, I think we can take that seriously. I want to take that seriously. Why I think stuff like, say, your legends and lattes and cozy fantasy is a very powerful thing, especially if you're already part of one of the already, if you're part of a marginalized group and you have like all the fucking hatred of the world poured over you every fucking day. I I kind of get why you don't want to read like angry theory in your free time to prepare for the fight. Maybe sometimes you just want to, take a bath or give a warm, soapy bath to your brain, just like switch off for a while. I totally get that, but I don't believe that that means that all forms of fiction should just be judged on their merits as escapism. I think there's other stuff that art can do that goes beyond just providing that warm bath to the soul. Know what I mean? Well, getting a degree in humanities and not getting a job is, well, in Germany, there's a running joke where you call people who have a degree in sociology or philosophy, you call that like a degree in taxi driving. That was back in the day before, Uber destroyed the taxi market as well. Oh, now I've slowly caught up with the chat, I think. Bilbo is the best Hobbit. Yeah, Bilbo is a cool Hobbit. I think, as I said, I've said this before. My favorite Hobbit is definitely Pippin. It's the one I feel the most kinship with. Um, but yeah, Bilbo is a cool Hobbit. So anyway, I think the Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay is an incredibly powerful story, but I don't think it's just about escapism. I think it's more about self empowerment through fiction, which goes beyond just escape. Right? It's the idea that, and it's clearly modeled on stuff like say the Superman comics. Right? It's like the idea that a lot of superheroes in the 30s and early 40s are sort of a and Shabon does this very cleverly when he ties it to the story of the golem, right? It's sort of like a fictional empowerment, or a form to build some sort of, you know self-empowerment to Jews in the era when anti-Semitism is even more rampant than usual. And I think that's more than just escape. It's something more, and I think it's a very powerful thing, but I'm not sure if I'm capable of explaining it correctly. And also, like, if I'm the kind of person, because I'm obviously not Jewish, right? It's like I don't have the background to fully um evaluate is the wrong word, right? Like, to fully appreciate what he's doing there. And I think that's sort of like one of the issues with that goes with that book. But anyway, read the book, Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. It's a fantastic novel. It's really, really, really good. Not as fun as Gentleman of the Road, which is So much fun. And I'm sure that Liam will back me up on this one. It's so much fun. Um, sorry, the chat is really difficult to navigate with a screen reader today. But yeah, I've been already sidetracked again. But anyway, yeah, go read Amazing Adventures of Caroline Clay, and go read Gentlemen of the Road, because it's so much fun. I think it's like what makes Gentlemen of the Road so good is that it has Chabon's very specific style, but it's also an entire love letter just to, Fafford and the Grey Mouser in all its details, and it works so well. Also, Vikings that are incredible alcoholics. Yeah, but that's kind of the point, right, Joe? The question is fun entertainment the same as escapism? Because if escapism does actually heal your soul as someone who's marginalized and suffers a lot, that's more than just entertainment, right? That's providing a necessary thing. And the question is, like, is entertainment the same thing, or is there like an additional quality to that? And I'm not sure about that. Yeah, but that's kind of the point. Like, we use the word escapism in all kinds of weird ways, and it's I think that's part of the problem, right? It's like that the left use escapism as an insult for people who are not willing to face the world and actually do something about it. And the right goes like, well, it's escapism. I want to be entertained. Keep your dirty politics out of my fiction. I want my blood and soil in Middle Earth. Don't tell me that it's blood and soil, because I like it. And and then and both kind of from like different ends of the spectrum kind of disregard the fact that there may be just like a fundamental need to escape from time to time, and that fundamental need is because the world that we live in is kind of fucked, which is why I would really highly recommend that book by, is it Greg Scharzer, Late Escapism and Contemporary Neoliberalism, Alienation, Work, and Utopia. It's a really powerful and interesting book because it does kind of use all these things, and he builds on, say, David Harvey's Brief History of Neoliberalism. He builds on Mark Fisher's Ghosts of My Life, and obviously capitalist realism. He goes back to people like Ernst Bloch and Herbert Marcuse on eros and civilization, and these aspects of it's a really good book. Like, if you can get a hold of it, I highly recommend reading that if you're interested in, like, sort of like the theory behind escapism, the need for escapism. Definitely did make me think a bit when I read it. So yeah, I think that's sort of on escapism one that I really liked. Wait, I need to scroll through that chat again. So yeah, these are my thoughts on escapism, I guess. All right. Maybe I've now reached the end of chat so far. So I hope. So yeah, this was the obligatory cough, so I can prove that I'm in fact slightly ill and not just pretending to be ill. Anyway, so that's sort of like what I said, like the whole part of like weakness that I want to go back to and examine in a video, and the like I'm not done with the escapism thing. I'll these things always come kind of connect and come back, and I think partly from what I can tell, why say someone like Brandon Sanderson is so successful is that he's really doubled down on having characters overcome um, problems that are thinly veiled allegories or metaphors for stuff that we in our world kind of suffer from or deal with, and he takes those and turns them into success stories where characters overcome these things and become heroes. And that's something we all want to read, because we all dream of overcoming all the things that we are dealing with, and being the hero. And I think that's one of the secrets of beyond just the easy prose and stuff like that. It's one of the secrets of Sanderson's success, is that he manages to encapsulate that sort of dream, that sort of idea that we all sort of need to do that, and that we all have the chance and the possibility to overcome all our hurdles and stuff like that, and be heroes of our own stories. And the sad truth is, no, not on our own. And I think so. These things kind of come back to that in my thinking at the moment, and like the way I want to build this, the way I want to do this in like different videos. So my plan is to do the weakness stuff, and like the talk on weakness first, and all the time in the background work on the Brandon Sanderson videos, because there will be two. I doubt Shabon will go back to the Gentleman of the Road universe. I think he's not the kind of character, not the kind of writer who goes back to like that kind of world. And I don't think it would work, right? It's a story that's like closed in itself, and that's good. I like short stories that actually work out, if that makes sense. Yeah, that's like another thing, right? I don't know, those of you who watched the the escapism video, I did actually manage to slip in the culture industry there for a moment. I did slip in the culture industry there for a moment. It's not the culture industry part that I want to do for the Sanderson video, but I've been struggling with the whole idea of actually me talking about like serious philosophy. It's hard for me to overcome the anxiety that someone will just like pop out of the bushes into the YouTube comments and go like, "Hey, you did this wrong." It's an irrational fear that I have. So I kind of snuck in the culture industry bit there to slowly, lower the threshold, I guess. So hopefully I'll continue to work on the actual Sanderson video soon. As for Gentlemen Bastards, I have only read the first one twice or maybe three times by now. Um, the Lies of Locke Lamora, and then I always fail like five chapters, one, two chapters into the second one, which may or may not be Red Sails on the Red Seas or under whatever it's called. And mostly I dislike personally dislike the way the story is told. And that's a personal taste thing. It's like you read The Lies of Locke Lamora and you have no idea what these people are thinking. There's no inner monologues, there's no internal perspective. It's written like someone describing, just writing down the scenes of a show you see on TV, right? It's scene by scene. You have these characters act very TV style, very Joss Whedon TV style kind of thing with the dialogue and everything. But there's no thoughts in there. Like you don't know what Locke is thinking. You don't know what Jean is thinking. You have no idea because you only get the outside perspective. And I don't know. Just, like I don't hate it, but I don't think it doesn't work that well. Also, I don't think they have enough of the I don't know. The bromance between Fafford and the Mouser feels way more realistic than the thing between Locke and Jean. Maybe once again because with Fafford and the Mouser we get some of their insights and their thought process, and I don't know. Locke is always cool, and Jean is always cool, and we have no idea what they feel and think. And I think that's a weakness in those kind of stories. Well, there you go, Britain. We can always bring another plague on your soul and your mind. We just talk about cheap modern fantasy and how it's not measuring up to the grandeur that is the slightly creepy Fafford and Grey Mouser. Sorry about that. The fact that like the cold is kind of fucking around with my voice tempts me to use my voice in all kinds of weird ways. The Grey Mouser is incredibly horny and incredibly thirsty for a drink, and so is Fafford. Though I think the priorities are kind of opposite, right? Like Fafford is drunk and then horny, and the Mouser is horny and then thirsty. Like they're sort of, but they have very limited priorities. I'm glad you liked Inherent Vice. I do really like that book. It's got that weird melancholy of like the Thomas Pynchon thing that makes Pynchon, especially like his stuff that's set in the 60s, your Crying of Lot 49 and stuff like that. So interesting that this sort of like this feeling that we had a chance for like a better world, like an alternative way of living, and it's slipping to the side. And you never fully know why it is happening because yeah, there's the machine that keeps going, and Nixon and whatever the cop names is, the pseudo-Scandinavian cop in Inherent Vice, and you have all these parts of the system, but it's also maybe that those who are sort of on the side of like alternative options of life kind of lost the thread, sort of lost the plot, and did not go all the way or not fight to the end. It kind of just like sort of that dream kind of slowly fades and vanishes. And I think, especially in Inherent Vice, he captures that melancholia, that melancholy of like sort of a better world slipping by because maybe we didn't try hard enough to actually make it real. he captures that in a wonderful way, and I really, really appreciate that. Fritz. Okay, it's uh, it's a choice. You wouldn't. I mean, I guess you can get away with that in the U.S. to call your kid Fritz. I would not try that in Germany. Just saying, it's it's not a good name in Germany. Um, yeah, he does do these things, but once again, Britain, with the way he does, he writes. The weakness of his writing style is that you can only see it from the outside. So you can only take the things he describes at face value, because you have no idea of the thought process behind anything. So I mean, that on the one hand, that makes it very, very easy for him to set up these kind of gotcha moments and surprises and cliffhangers, because he doesn't have to do much foreshadowing, because obviously his characters also were dumb enough to not get stuff. But I think it's sort of like a lot of flash and then very little behind it, and that's sort of my issue with Liza Locklear. I was enchanted the first time I read it, and then when I reread it, I'm like, well, he's not telling me this. He's not telling anything. He's just doing flash after flash after flash. It's like fireworks, but without a dragon that goes as fast as the express train to Bywater. Well, Fritz is short for Friedrich, and so like in Germany, there's also that term "der alte Fritz," which is well, is a pejorative for our last emperor, or not Wilhelm, but the one before, like the alte Fritz, the Frederick, Emperor Frederick, the in this case the Great, because all our emperors are great, right? Unless they have red beards, and then they go all Mediolanum on, well, most of it northern Italy. But yeah, that's kind of where Fritz is used in German. Is like it's short form for Friedrich, and can be used as a pejorative. Also, it's sort of like Fritz, or the even shorter form for Fritz, which is Fritzchen, is sort of the character for a bunch of really, really bad old German jokes. The German joke, like the character that's like the butt of the joke for like old German jokes, is usually called Fritz. So yeah, um, I think that's kind of why it doesn't work in Germany, because there's too much baggage attached to it. But I don't think any of that is attached in the US. So yeah, no, it's very much not like the N word at all. No, it's very much not like the N word. It's not a racist thing. It's just like a very stereotypical name, I guess, in a way that, your like cliche British guy for in some eras is called John Bull. Sort of that stereotypical German name is Fritz or Friedrich. I think that's where it goes. So it's very much not like an N word, because it's not used as a racist slur to take down a different ethnicity. And it's important to be aware of the fact that that's what the N word is. It's a racist slur. Fritz is not a racist slur. It's something used by Germans for themselves in a lot of ways. Yeah, that makes sense, Liam. If the others have diminutive names as well. I don't know. Naming kids is such a weird thing because it's like sort of like the ultimate power that you as parents have. Because like names are so powerful still, right? I mean, beyond the idea of that, like if you know someone's true name, you have power over them. But like because of all kinds of like social pressures and shit like that, right? We have names frame so much. There's like, at least in Germany, there's like studies that teachers grade kids that have names that are associated with like lower class kind of play things that are associated with that. They grade them worse even if they have like the same tests than people with a different name. So you take the same kind of test and you give them the same thing with like different names, and names have so much power in our world. And it's something that parents choose for their children. It's something that, once again, it's like it's not that idea that you can be the master or mistress of your own fate, right? No, you can't. Like from the get-go, someone else decided up to a point where you're going just by giving you a name. I think that's just like an interesting thing to know, to be aware of. Sorry for raising the pressure there, Liam. Yeah, Karen is the same. Yeah, maybe it's like a Karen. I think it's yeah, partly like a Karen. There's certainly like a bit of like a there's a level of self-irony with the Fritz thing in Germany, or used to be. I think it's also aged out at this point. Like, but yeah, there's a level of self-awareness there that I'm not quite sure with where if it's there with Karens in the English language. Yeah. As a name that has meaning, yes, definitely, Ori. That's kind of where Fritz goes in Germany. But I think it's also passing because it's sort of like something I kind of still realize. But it was already sort of like my parents' kind of generation kind of thing, and I assume like Gen Z doesn't understand the connotations of Fritz anymore in Germany. I'm pretty sure, which is good. Yeah, yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's definitely part of the ultimate power, and I think that's sort of something that goes with a lot of the like on the borders of the trans discourse, because a lot of that kind of stuff kind of goes into the idea that you can actually be the in charge of yourself, changing your name, changing your gender, changing all of these, like, which I guess might be part of why it's so hard for a lot of parents to accept that, because it's sort of like you're breaking that you're completely breaking the hold that parents have over you, right? In a way. Speaking as someone who is very much not trans and has no idea of that, but like why I think it might be so hard for some parents to accept their kids being trans is because you're sort of like breaking a lot of like connections that have been like very deeply ingrained in a social way, like names and names and gender, but like mostly like stuff like names and stuff, things like that. I think that might be why so many parents struggle so hard with their kids being trans, or wanting to change the name, I guess. Because it's also like it's with the name especially, right? It's telling your parents they chose wrong, and, and I can see that hurting. I can see that hurting parents on like an emotional level, which not me defending any of that. I'm just trying to figure out why sometimes things escalate so brutally there, and I think a lot of that kind of comes down to these sort of um very deeply sort of like bits that have been taken as like social, like the the basis of how we do social stuff, sort of, and so we don't question that, and we just take that for granted. And when someone questions it, it feels like, you know, yeah, questioning like the fundamentals, and well, very much sort of rebellion against your basic choices and stuff like that. Oh, I didn't know that, Liam. The grant does help there, but yeah, so they in Germany, it's the funny thing is, like in Germany, it's a lot of like French sounding and in um uh, English sounding names. Like the archetypal name, underclass, like lower class kind of name that will get you worse grades and stuff in Germany is Kevin. Which, I know is just a regular name in the US and probably in the UK as well. Like, if you're named Kevin in Germany, you'll have a really hard time because everyone assumes all the negative stereotypes for lower class, economically challenged parents and so forth. And there's studies that, like, if you give like teachers the same like test, and you put like a name like Kevin on it, and then you put like a less negatively stereotyped name like, say, Richard on it, they'll grade it differently when it's Kevin. Kevin gets worse grades than Richard, which is fucked up. Yeah, that's true. You get to pick your own names, Joe, for all as authors. No, I don't think you have bad taste in literature, Bretton. It's fine to love the Lies of Locke Lamora. It's a fun book to read. I mean, as I said, like, I enjoyed it the first time round. It just left something to be desired when I reread it. But that's me. That's my personal taste. And there's enough really bad, like objectively bad books that I still enjoy. Where I'm like, yeah, well, I see why all of this is bad, but it works. So I'm having fun. Yeah, that's a good idea. Call yourself Booker. So if I ever hire you to do some work for me, Liam, does that mean I have to pay the Booker price? Sorry, I'm not good at this. Is my point. I do feel terrible for that one. Hey Dan, how you doing? Just saw you joined. I had to scroll down the chat. Turns out reading chat with a screen reader is not what screen readers and chats are made for, I guess. Harry Daniel. Well, let's put it this way. Better Daniel than Dresden in that regard, because Daniels don't get carpet bombed that much. So here's the thing that I found really interesting on the names and stuff like that, that I really loved when it came to gender in Hopeland by Ian MacDonald, which you all should go and read because no one ever reads Ian MacDonald, and it's a shame. And like in the Hopeland society, like the very specific alternative lifestyle culture community, whatever you want to call Hopeland, um, they call kids just kids. I mean, they're using the German word kind. They're just kids until kids at some age decide whether they want to be a boy or a girl, because until then they're just a kid. And looking at it from the outside, I'm like, yeah, that makes so much sense, because from my very limited memories from when I was like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years old, so much of that is just about being a kid. That is very much not connected to anything that like adults would call gender. I'm like, yeah, well, let kids be kids, and when they feel like they want to be a boy or a girl, with all the stuff that comes with being a boy or a girl, then they can choose, and then they can do something. And I just found that really interesting, because it's a powerful way to talk about that. And like so many things that Ian McDonald does, and he just does it so casually on the side, where it's like, not a big discussion. It's just like something that happens, and he just like shows how you know, how different kids decide to do that over time and make different choices. And they're like, well, yeah, look, it kind of works. It's cool. Hey, Varsha, almost missed you there once again. The chat is scrolling up and down, and my screen reader is not good at following it. But that means that a lot of people are talking, which is good. Yeah, Harry, I don't know, man. That's tough. Yeah, but that Ori, I think, is an interesting point. Like, parents can't be wrong or right when they name someone, but it shouldn't also mean that, like, if someone later on decides that the name doesn't fit, that you then should feel insulted because, yeah, you couldn't have known, but maybe you should accept that you got it wrong, sort of like 10 years later or whatever. Like, I mean, it's also like the reasons why people name their kids in different ways. I found it like with my niece now. Obviously, they were struggling to find a name that works both in Israel and in Germany. So because it's a kid's name, so you want to make it in a way that does not lend itself to being mocked in, say, kindergarten or primary school or whatever, and that people in different countries with a Semitic language and a Germanic language in a Germanic language um, can both pronounce without too many problems, right? That does narrow things down quite a bit, unless you want to go real old school Old Testament. But yeah, the dick thing is obviously yeah. Yeah, the job thing, Katya, is very true, right? It's like you have a name that doesn't sound like the standard name in the country you're living in right now, and all the negative stereotypes, all the racism comes through, and the classism too, right? It's like me having a very high, sophisticated, in Germany at least, sort of like my name's sounds incredibly educated, like, because I guess, I mean, I come from an educated background, right? middle class. But my mom's like, my mom's first generation academic. But she decided to name her son Raphael and her daughter Felicitas, and those are Bourdieu would have to say a few things about that habitus, I guess. But that helps. You can't. Yeah, there's a lot of power in names if you try to apply for jobs and stuff like that. I think it's important. But yeah, that you mentioned that, Cardia, because yeah, me not having a job, I kind of forget that. But yeah, it does have so much impact on your later life, and it's kind of hard to understate that. All right, I'm trying to scroll down to the end of the chat because as I said, screen reader is slow and not doing the thing it's supposed to do. Oh yeah, bye Liam. See you very soon, and do well, probably on Tuesday, maybe on Tuesday at the Lavi Tidar authors event at the LA Public Library. Like if it ends up like the last time that Ori talked about when no one showed up, and this time it's just gonna be us, like people from this conversation today and the unabridged burners chat, and it's like there's 5 people there, we all know each other. Poor man will feel probably harrowed, I guess, at that point. I hope it's not like that. So yeah, go register for the Lavi Tidar authors event at the LA Public Library on the 3rd of October. Oh wait, maybe don't, because then everyone comes from here again. I don't know. Do what you want to do, and please go there. It's going to be great. It's all about the circumference of the world, which is a fantastic book, and you'll learn so much fun things about L. Ron Hubbard, which are very much not important to the plot, but it's still fun. Hey, also, how you doing? We're having an interesting discussion. Also, have you already registered to the Lavi Tidar authors event? This is the official promotion stream, apparently. I know. There's a Neon Book Club thread on Goodreads. Well, I'm terrible at using Goodreads, but we already know that, right? It's like I never write reviews because I'm too lazy to do that. Although, wait, I wrote one review on on Goodreads for an academic book. It was really funny. So I read the is it Oxford University Press or something like that, handbook on parasocial experiences, and I checked it in on Goodreads, and it had 0 stars out of 0 reviews and then 0 ratings. so I kind of felt obligated to actually do something because I was like apparently the first person. I'm like, yeah, this is like pissing my name into this in the snow. I can make a mark here. I can make a real mark. And the fact that like the first thing I thought about was pissing your name into the snow was is probably telling in a lot of ways. But yeah, I don't know. Well, Kadia, good night. Have a good night. Try not to fall out of Belgium again. I know it's dangerous. It's a small country. And yeah, see you tomorrow at the Perdido Street Station conversation at Angela's channel, for example. Lee's Astounding. I haven't read that yet, but it sounds interesting. It sounds like something I might be very interested in. But the next two books I'll be reading, well, the next three books I'll be reading are a reread of the Venerable Bede's history of the clerical history of the peoples of England, and then Hild by Nicola Griffith. And then when it comes out on Tuesday, it's going to be Mennewood by Nicola Griffith. And if things go well, which obviously I can't promise, there might be a chance that I will have a conversation with Nicola Griffith later this year, which obviously makes me incredibly nervous and frightened and starstruck and all the other things. But also, yeah, if it happens, I'll be overexcited for weeks. So beware of that. I might be talking about nothing else for weeks if all of it comes through. Yeah, but no nonfiction on the golden age of science. That sounds still very interesting because yeah, I feel at this point, so much of like, especially sci-fi, fantasy as well, but we don't talk that much about fantasy. But like, sci-fi is so much about like the combination of sort of the culture of the people that are doing it, and the way they're interacting with each other, and the stories they're writing, and we're all talking about like separating art from artists and stuff like that, but I don't think you can do that with classic science fiction in that way, because you might be able to separate a specific artist from a specific piece of art, but it's all very much part of this ongoing conversation of people. It's an element. It's a window into an ongoing conversation. It's a window into an ongoing bit of culture, I guess. So it makes sense to look at that from a more from a nonfiction perspective as well, I think. Yeah. Also, you're not the first person mourning Ian Banks. But here's the thing. I could try to contact Stephen Erickson, because he spoke so much about how he loves Ian Banks. Maybe I can get even Stephen Erickson to have a conversation on the culture novels. That sounds like something I should probably try, which I guess means that I will not, because I'm too scared to talk to people. No. So Ori, I think fantasy has the same thing. I think it's more visible in science fiction for some reason. Probably because the more sci-fi themed parts of like magazines and stuff, sort of it's more visible. I think fantasy does have the same thing up to a point, but that whole sort of like different science fiction magazines, writers starting out as writing letters to the magazines, then becoming writers themselves, sort of like that ongoing. It feels more visible, more out in the open in sci-fi than it is in fantasy. I assume it's there in fantasy as well, but with like especially like 1950s, 1960s sci-fi, it's sort of like even if you're not very much interested in the history of sci-fi, it's very hard to not be aware of the fact that all these people hung out together and sometimes took drugs together and talked with each other and so forth. Whereas in fantasy, the authors are not as open about it, I guess. I so that's sort of my point. Is like I think it's the same, but I think it's more visible in sci-fi. Well, that's the point. All novels are like all of literature is an ongoing conversation. Every novel is written as a response to older novels, sometimes explicitly, sometimes implicitly, because of course we're all, if we write books, we're obviously inspired by the books we've read before. So it obviously always happens. I was more talking about that whole, sort of like fandom to writer kind of weird sci-fi scene that you have with like the 50s and 60s when they're you know when they're all hanging out in these at these conventions and taking drugs together and I don't know, hanging out at rocket scientists houses in the 30s, taking even more drugs, taking part in weird sex magic rituals, summoning the moon child, and that kind of stuff. So I hope that makes more sense than I. Because I felt you misunderstood what I said there, Ori. I hope it makes more sense now. The best generation ships are the ones in Alistair Reynolds' Poseidon's Children's trilogy, which is one of those fantasy series where I have no idea why no one talks about them because they're fun and they have elephants in space. Um, but then I don't know. Like they're not the best sci-fi ever, but I really enjoyed them, and for some reason, everyone when they talk about Alistair Reynolds, they're always about, oh, Revelation Space is so awesome. It's like, yeah, it's cool, but I did really appreciate him going out of his way into doing the more sort of positive, optimistic kind of, hey, look, we could actually do cool things and have elephants in space and neo pronouns and third genders, and it might all just work out because we could actually be good people for once. Um, all right, Britain. The Dan Simmons thing. I think reading Hyperion is definitely worth it. It's not a bad book. It's more that the seeds of what became later Dan Simmons are there, but you can very much easily overlook them. And there's good stuff in Hyperion, and his world building is fun. So I don't know. Go read Hyperion. Don't let me tell you to don't read Hyperion. Just don't read Flashback, and don't ever believe the library letter when he tells you that it's a psychological book and not a political. Flashback is a racist motherfucking rant by a racist asshole. And that's politics. And people using their deep voice and good sound effects to tell you otherwise are full of shit. Or at least disingenuous. And I hate disingenuous people. Because there's a responsibility when you have a platform, and I want people to take that seriously, is my point. So yeah, I don't know. Read Hyperion, stop after Hyperion, or at least stop after Fall of Hyperion, because things get wacky afterwards. Maybe if you feel like reading Endymion and Rise of Endymion, you can do that. Don't read Ilium and Olympus. They're not actually good books. And don't ever read Flashback, because it's just bad. Unless you want to get angry and, throw rocks at Dan Simmons. In that case, yeah, go do it. He deserves it. But they're obviously, like, they're objectively hate-filled messes of books. And it's important to be aware of that, because just because someone wrote a book and name dropped a bunch of, like, well-regarded people like Shakespeare and Marcel Proust and whatever, doesn't mean they're, they can't be, like, well, hate-filled assholes with, like, no self-esteem, or my point is, don't fall for the blame. Just actually look at what they're saying and then make your own judgment. And then you should probably realize what a pitiful, like, writer Dan Simmons really is. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the Terror is good. I mean, that's the point. It's like Dan Simmons knows how to use words. He's not a bad writer on a technical level. It's just that, like, he's very much in love with the Western canon. He very much hates women having rights, people of color having rights, and not everyone worshiping at the altar of William Shakespeare. That's kind of the problem that he has. He wishes. there's like bits in fucking Ilium that are so ridiculous when he talks about the question of whether Shakespeare was gay or not, and in some of the sonnets, and he just takes, like, an entire paragraph to talk about, like, how these, and this was written, like, in the early 2000s. He doesn't use the word woke. He still talks about political correctness and stuff like that. It's like how these new critics were trying to insinuate that that Shakespeare might have actually written those love sonnets for a man because he might have been gay. And now in the 24th century, or now 44th century, whatever, whenever Ilium takes place, I think it's 44th century. Now we obviously know that wasn't true, and we should actually trust those critics of the 19th century who really understood Shakespeare. I'm like, how incredibly ridiculously pitiful do you have to be as a human being that you write a science fiction novel where you write into the story that in the 44th century everyone knows that the people you disagree with in the 20th century were wrong? It's like, how, I don't know, fucking insanely stupid. And it's like, I feel almost bad for the guy, but almost, because on the other hand, you have people like, let's name names, because we're definitely here to name names and cause trouble. What's his name? The Australian sci-fi booktube guy that everyone loves, Witch in Time, idiot. Going like, is this the most complex science fiction book ever? No, Ilium is a mess and it's bullshit. And you should be aware of the fact, just because someone fucking name drops the Iliad doesn't mean they understand shit. I can name drop the Iliad. I can even name drop the Odyssey. I can name drop fucking works in days. I've read my Hesiod. I've even read the Odes of Pindar. Does that make me a good sci-fi author? No, it doesn't. It's bullshit, but so many people fall for that crap, and it just absolutely fucking annoys me how easily people in sci-fi and fantasy are taken in by the mere mention and name drop of authors and bits and pieces that are considered classics, because deep inside every sci-fi and fantasy fan, there's this little kid that still smarts from back when their parents told them, "Oh, you're just reading science fiction." We all want to be taken seriously. We all want to be seen as reading serious literature, even though it's spaceships in there. So whenever someone name drops a classic somewhere, we're like, "Hey, this has to be serious literature, right? It's using Shakespeare. It's using Homer." It's like, no, that's not how that works, and it just pisses me off so much because fantasy and science fiction have so much to give, and they have so much, so many interesting, so many powerful, so many meaningful things they can do if we take them seriously on their own grounds, on their own merits, as the genres that do very specific things. But going like, hey, as long as you mention the Western canon and dedicate your fucking book to Harold Bloom, yeah, you might be a good author. No, that's not how that bullshit works. It's just begging for approval from acknowledged authorities and wanting to be admitted to the elite. And I hate that. I fucking hate it, and people who fall for that, even if you tell them that they're falling for something. And I don't know. I have very, very, very little sympathy for people who keep falling for it, is my point. Because we need to call out bullshit, because fantasy and science fiction is so powerful. It can be so powerful. And these people are holding us back. Yeah, Flashback is really terrible. It's not a good book. It's full of incredibly cheap racism, um, in all kinds of ways. Like the fact that Dan Simmons thought it was a good idea to have a character in a prison, in an open air prison, a Black American character, a prisoner, a convict, named unironically Delroy N-word Brown. And that's something that Dan Simmons, being a middle-aged, supposedly well-educated, praised author, thought was a good idea. I mean, some people are in need of a good bricking, and yeah, that's all I'm going to say. Well, that's the point. Of course, Shakespeare is great. That's not the point. There's a lot of stuff out there that is really good. The question is whether you assume that these are objectively good things, and everything that is not part of that very specific canon, that Western canon, whatever you want to call it, is not worth your consideration, or whether you fall down that, these are things that have shaped our taste, and it's important to be aware of that, but be aware of the fact that there's all kinds of things that played into that. Plato is not the most important philosopher of ancient Greece, because he was the best. He's the one we have the most documents by him and Aristotle. Those are different things. And the same goes for Shakespeare and a lot of these stuff. Yes, that stuff is interesting. That stuff is powerful and it's great. But it's also there because a lot of people chose it to keep to be, to stay part of the conversation, to stay in the cultural memory. We're primed to understand, to not understand, but we're primed to read it as important and read it as powerful. It's what we get told in school, right? We're not going to high school and people going like, well, there's also Shakespeare and he's kind of shit. No, we're told Shakespeare is important, and we read those plays with that framing from the start, and that's part of it. Also, always Marlowe over Shakespeare, because Marlowe is way more rock and roll. Jared, I have no idea why what you said. Just wow. I'm not sure if you're talking about like how terrible Dan Simmons is, or if you're talking about like how terrible I am, which both are valid opinions. So I hope I did not anger you too much there. Of course not. Okay, I'm glad. After all, we're gonna fight it out tomorrow on the Unicorns Read channel when we talk about Perdido Street Station and talk about the very very bitter end and choice theft of the third degree. So yeah, please come over there tomorrow if you have the time. Yeah, Simmons definitely appreciates classic literature, and I mean, he taught classic literature for a while, right? I get it, but so much of his books, or so many bits of his books, are filled with him complaining about how students are not actually taking it seriously anymore. And he felt like a boomer in 2000, or like even in the mid 90s, which is bad. Which is really bad. Also, he goes fully into slut shaming Helen of Troy. Just saying, which does certainly take a level of confidence, but still, it's like there's so many bits and pieces in there that are just insanely bad when you get to Ilium and Olympus, where it's just, God, someone just I don't know, take that man's fucking keyboard away. Which it's sad because he clearly has the skill to write really interesting bits and pieces, and create atmosphere and do really fun and interesting and cool world building, and then he just, because he's so fucking bitter all the time. It's like, oh, no one's worshipping the classics. I need to write a book about how the world goes to pieces if we're not all libertarians that are also worshipping the classics. And like, nah, it's not how that works, man. Yeah. But yeah, sorry about getting sidetracked and whatnot. But Britain, um, if you feel like reading Hyperion, go read Hyperion. Don't let me keep you away from it. Um, just don't think it's the be all end all of science fiction. It's not. It's not. It's not a classic in the sense of it's an incredibly good science fiction book. It's just something that got popular because once again people were like, hey, look, someone's quoting the classics, and someone on in major newspapers talking about our book. Finally we're relevant, and so much of that cringy, like, that begging for relevance kind of thing comes through when people talk about Dan Simmons in so many levels. And it's something that I kind of fall back to with heavy metal as well. It's like, yeah, also it is very much a boomerang. But yeah, and it kind of reminds me of like something like an issue I've had with parts of heavy metal for a long time, because heavy metal is kind of in a similar place, right? A lot of heavy metal is all about being a rebel, but also deeply, deeply in there wanting the appreciation of your elders, which is why every heavy metal band at some point tries to make an album with an orchestra, because everyone's like, "Hey, look, we can do classical music as well. Can we play with the big boys now? Are we cool now? Are we cool now?" It's so annoying that sort of like playing at being the underdog, playing at being a rebel, playing at being something else, and then still reincorporating the power structure and still going back to that sort of, very, very conservative traditional power structure. It just annoys me. Good one, Joe. Good one, Joe. Yeah, read Shadow of Hyperion. Because at the end of the day, Hyperion is just a shadow of Hyperion when it comes to quality. How's that for advertising? No. Go read Shadow of Hyperion. I mean, go read all of Joe's books. Also, I hear that he's working on an epic fantasy novel that may or may not come out soon, and I am very much excited about that. Um, I'm sure it's going to be really good. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. You should definitely use the Dan Simmons keyword there, because why not? He's basically running his entire popularity on the keyword of William Shakespeare. So if you can get like one really shitty Shakespeare reference into Shadow of Hyperion, that would be really good. But I guess it's past its final edit, so probably not, unless you've already built it in. All right, the fantasy novel comes out on November 7th. What's the title? What's the title for the fantasy book? Because everyone should read Joe's fantasy novel. But here's the thing, Jared. Yeah, heavy metal is not like, rebellious in the punk sense, but there's still that idea that you're sort of, you're the underground. You're not like the mainstream. You're different, but you want that approval from your parents, right? And that's sort of the point. Like punk doesn't care. Punk is truly rebellious, at least when it's good punk. Partial Function. That's a fantasy novel. That's giving me flashbacks, man. That's giving me flashbacks to my computer science degree studies, man. Oh, cool. Wait, you're having a novel. You're writing a novel as well, Breton? I didn't know that. Is it fantasy or is it sci-fi or is it something else? Um, while we're at it, who else is writing a novel right now? Let me know. Welcome to the very much not writers workshop. While I'm trying to scroll down to the end of the chat again. Math-based kung fu. I'm all right. I'm on board. I love that. It sounds really good. Math-based kung fu sounds almost as good as the very biblical Old Testament kung fu that Lancelot uses in By Force Alone by Labitidar, which is definitely the best kung fu I've ever encountered. Awesome. Yeah, that sounds really cool, Britain. Um, I'm not sure if the Michael Moorcock and Robert E. Howard vein are the same veins. I feel they're sort of. So, one of them might be a vein and one of them might be an artery, but I don't know biology, so maybe I'm fucking up the metaphor here. Do you have like a definite length for the hybrid helix thing, Joe, though? I feel like you said that before, that you have like a definite number for the hybrid helix series, and then I forgot because I'm bad at brain things. See, also, and that's where you're going wrong. When I'm writing down things, I'm using TXT files in Notepad because I hate editors and I hate the world. And at some point, I'll just all copy them into one major file, and then I'll use the LaTeX markup language to turn it into a PDF, and someone else has to deal with the consequences. Also, it's not a novel. It's not even fiction yet. It's just me hating the world. Isn't there like a Sanderson thing? The arithmetist, is that like also math-based fighting? Am I getting this wrong? Got I suckered in by Sanderson using cool titles to do something terrible? I'm sorry, Joe. You just made a typo there, and you turned trigonometry into trigonometry, and now I have a very Winnie the Pooh weird kind of image in my head of trigonometry. But whatever his weight in pounds, shillings, and ounces, he always seems bigger because of his bounces. Anyway, trigonometry. Um, I'm sorry. I will not be able. I will not be able to get rid of that in my brain for a while. Which is the power of using a fucking screen reader, because they don't. They don't fuck around with typos, whereas your brain and your eyes might. So don't you ever dare hire me as a proofreader. Mani sounds good. Manichaeism is one of the better religions, so go with Mani. 25. All right. That's a lot. Oh, a Western? That sounds good. I feel so. Here's an interesting thought that I found fascinating. It's like been a while ago, like in an interview, Kenneth Haidt, the RPG creator and writer and so forth, talking about like how basic D&D is at its heart and at its core a Western. The narrative of D&D is a Western, because you're playing characters that leave civilization and go and tame the wild and turn it into more civilization. You keep on the borderlands. It's basically a Western story. It's like you go to the wild and then you fight the natives and you give them blankets full of smallpox, and then you take over the land and turn it into cattle ranches, and you know what I mean. So I find it interesting that there's an overlap between fantasy and Western, where you can and you go to Robert E. Howard, who certainly wrote both, and you can read some of the Conan stories, and you could just like reframe them as those as like Westerns, right? Obviously, with something like across is it called Across the Black River, Beyond the Black River? That one, which is basically a western anyway, but or well, western in the sense of like a JF Cooper kind of leather stockings kind of western. So not in the prairie, but in the forest. But yeah, there's an overlap between fantasy and western that makes a lot of sense to me, I think. Winnie the Pooh based kung fu. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense. Kung fu, yeah. I would outlaw math if I could. That sounds like a wild mix also, because especially how can you rip off Black Company magic? I mean, beyond just the effects. All right. See you again, Joe. Thanks for stopping by. It was great having you here, man. Yeah, I mean, Britain. If you live in Oklahoma, you have room for westerns. I could not write a western in my home state. That would not work. I could write a story about like how the local landgrave changes from Catholicism to Protestantism because Martin Luther tells him that yes, he can have more than one wife, and then he decides to become Protestant immediately. And no, I did not make that up. Just saying. All westerns are stories of revenge. But yeah, no, the part about the Landgrave of Hesse deciding to switch to convert to Protestantism because Martin Luther found a bit in the Bible that told him that yes, he could have like more than one wife, despite whatever the Pope said. Yeah, that's real. It's not what the contemporary Lutheran Church of Germany is advertising, though. I'll have to say that. But we're obviously not in the business of advertising the Lutheran Church of Germany here. We're in the business of truth, as long as it hurts. Which is why I'm drinking Pilgrim beer. Which is incredibly cheap beer, just saying. It's the unfiltered version of the Paderborner Pils, which costs 50 cents per bottle. And yeah, so the filtered Pilsner, the Paderborner, is like one of the cheapest ones you can get in Germany, which costs like 45 cents per bottle. And for 5 cents more, you get the one that is called Pilgrim's Pilsner. Because we all want to, wear sackcloth and wander through freezing Middle Europe to someplace and maybe flagellate ourselves. That's what I took. Makes sense, right? Look, we're not talking about sense in Luther, but Luther was fucking anti-Semitic. You read the stuff on the Jews. He's really explicitly anti-Semitic, to points that go way beyond the general level of anti-Semitism in 16th century Germany. But I mean, arguing, debate broing Martin Luther 500 years after he's been dead does unfortunately not work. Yeah, Ori, I know. It's like number one. It's like find God, find a reason for polygamy, become a saint. Also, hide those huge gold plates full of commandments. Well, funding a versus founding a religion is a different thing. Um, for that, you might still end up with polygamy and your own fleet of ships cruising the Mediterranean looking for gold. That does certainly fund your religion that allows for polygamy. If you're that guy. All right. All right, Britain. Here's the things. We're not going into this tonight because I'm too drunk, and this is a very complicated situation. But I feel the Jesus was Jewish argument is a very difficult argument to make about contemporary Christian anti-Semitism. It doesn't necessarily work that well because late Second Temple Judaism is a very complicated, historically very complicated situation, and the argument, it's not the gotcha that people make it out to be. It's like it's super weird and fucking complicated, and we should probably not even go there. Just understand that, anti-Semitism is wrong fundamentally by definition because you're actually being a racist asshole for no reason whatsoever. And I think we should stop it at that and not try to actually argue with people about why their specific form of racism doesn't work. But at its core, it's always been racism that is, being embellished by sort of cultural signifiers and religious signifiers and whatnot. But fuck it, you're a racist asshole. We'll never be able to. Oh, obviously not you, Britain. But at the end of the day, it's like don't even try to argue with those people. Tell them they're wrong, and that's that. Because some things you can't actually solve by debate. Is my point here. And even the beginning of Lutheranism and Protestantism is a very complicated situation with all kinds of elements of both political pressure, local political pressure. For example, the main narrative, Luther hates the idea of selling indulgences, and so he fights against the Catholic Church. It's like the specific sellers of indulgences that Luther was agitating against, they did not pay money to the Catholic Church, because the main profiteer from these indulgences was the local dukes. It's like the secular rulers that are taking large profit margins from these indulgences. So the fact that Luther is using theological arguments against the selling of indulgences, yes, he's doing that, and that brings him into conflict with the Catholic Church. But on a political level, he's not arguing against the Catholic Church. What he basically wants is the Catholic Church to actually use its power, if it has any, to rein in, up to a point at least, to rein in the local secular rulers to keep out of, to stop profiteering from selling indulgences and so forth. And then you can look at whether the Catholic Church does have the power to actually rein in a landgrave or duke or whatever in Germany in 1510 or whatever. And it turns out they probably don't have that power. And then it kind of all escalates out of there. But my point is, religious history is kind of complicated and messy, and most of the narratives, the straightforward narratives, are wrong. So that's that's me on the beginning of Lutheranism tonight. Um, for everything else, I would have to go and do some rereading. I did write a term paper once on um, the prophecies of a second deluge in the early 16th century, and how it coincided with the peasant uprisings and the beginning of Protestantism, and certain phenomena in the sky, and meteors and shit, and it's ridiculous fun. Yeah, like the broadsheets they were publishing back then are all they're all powerful and fun and insanely cool. Is my point. I used one of them a while ago for a thumbnail. The one that I still love, which is one of those pamphlets from like a broadsheet pamphlet, woodcut from 1520 something, where they the four evangelists are shelling the city of Rome with a cannon that shoots Bibles, because they're using the actual gospels against the evil Catholic Church in Rome. And it's just like, yeah, someone drew that and printed it and shared it on market squares in villages in Germany in 1520 something. And it's like, I just love the fact that these kind of things exist. Just one of those fun things. Which, is why history is actually always fun and cool, because as soon as you actually burrow down into details anywhere in history, you'll find something that is just so ridiculously human and so ridiculously enthrallingly and adoringly human. And it's like, yeah, this is awesome. I want to take this very specific moment of human hatred, and I will treasure it until the end of my days. I just want to put it into like a small flower pot and put it on my window. That kind of level of just like how ridiculous we as a species are. Which I'm sure is the best endorsement of history and studying history that I can give. Anyway, guys, it's 11:30 something, and well, we've been doing this. I've been doing this for 2.5 hours, and some of you have been staying with me for 2.5 hours. We might want to actually end this now, and thanks for actually showing up, and I hope you had a good time. I certainly did. I hope some of you can make it to tomorrow's Perdido Street Station discussion on Angela's Do Unicorns Read channel, and we'll talk about the end of a very powerful and unique and interesting fantasy book. That is urban and Marxist and angry and all the other good things. And I'm very, very much looking forward to that. So yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks also. Thanks Ori. Thanks Britain. Hey Ben. First of all, thanks for showing up, Ben, and see you around, man. It's been a lot of fun. There's a saying that like there's a German thing. Okay, I'll explain it, and then I'll leave. So, if you want to tell in German, there's like a very specific saying. If you want to say like something was amazing, and there's two versions of that. And in German, you say, "Es war mir ein Inneres," it's been an inner or like an internal, and one option is Blumenpflücken, like picking flowers, and the other one is the dark one is es war mir ein innerer Reichsparteitag, and yeah, which means what we did, it was so great. It was like an inner, well, like Nazi parties summit, basically. Um, Now you know it's tactless as fuck. Don't ever use that unless you really want to embarrass someone. Anyway, thanks everyone for hanging out. It was great. I had a really good time. I'll see you around. We'll do incredibly dumb things, and I'll talk about well, weakness, and then Hild and Mennewood and stuff. Hopefully, very soon. That's the plan, at least. Huh? And I said quit stream, and now I have to say quit stream again. So yeah. Well, this is it. I'll see you around very soon. Cheers.